I've always liked the idea of adapting vintage lenses to my modern digital cameras. Manual lenses in general force you to slow down and take photography at a different pace, and that attention to detail when nailing a shot can make you better. There are also many old lenses that have imperfections and characteristics of their own, giving them and the resulting photos a charm that is hard to find in modern lenses. Of course, not every vintage lens is good, and each one has problems of their own, but if you find the right one, it can be like striking gold. Reputable vintage lenses that are in good condition are getting rarer by the day because there's a fixed amount in existence, and no new ones are getting made. But the simple idea that an old, worn down, seemingly irrelevant lens is not only useful, but valuable in this day and age is very cool to me. So when I found this lens during my trip in Tokyo, I couldn't resist. Today I'll be sharing the story behind this lens and of course the many photos I've taken with it. Let's begin. Vintage shopping in Japan. Japan is not only a great place for photography, but also a hub for camera enthusiasts. They've got a large vintage market and are notoriously known for taking good care of their gear. So you could wander around into little hole-in-the-wall camera shops and scrounge for old gems. If you get lucky, you'll find something worth buying. Me personally, I'm not particularly a fixer-upper, so getting an old piece of camera gear and fixing it up to make it new again isn't really my thing. Plus, all the good gear I found was priced pretty fairly because most of the camera shops there know the value of what they're selling. And anything that's not, you'll probably find in the discount sections. So it's up to you if you want to do a lot of digging. You will see a lot of cool cameras though. As I walked around and explored the city, I mainly focused on street photography, capturing moments and perspectives that stood out to me. It was then that I found this lens in one of the most unexpected of places. In the loft store of Shibuya is a camera section filled with vintage lenses and many other reskinned film cameras for decent prices. Loft is just a general goods store, so I was just there looking for stationery and other stuff, not expecting anything camera related. But to my surprise, I saw a lens I actually recognized, the Asahi Super Takumar 50mm f1.4. The Asahi Super Takumar 50mm f1.4. The Pentax Asahi Super Takumar was a series of lenses released in the mid-1960s to early 1970s, with the intention of competing with Zeiss, the top lens makers at the time. These lenses have become quite renowned, earning the nicknames Zeiss Killer and Planar Killer. The first incarnation was an 8-element lens, which was apparently very costly, and rumored to lose money on every lens made. Because of this, they dialed it down a bit and made a 7-element Super Takumar, which was the one I found. You can differentiate the two by looking at the mark on the lens. The little red mark on the left of the 4 indicates it's a 7-element version, while the 8-element version has a mark on the right. Another interesting thing about these lenses is that the 7-element versions contain thorium and are radioactive, while the 8-element versions do not. The thorium was said to improve image quality and are apparently not dangerous for photographers to use. It does cause a yellowing of the glass if left untreated for a long enough period of time, although supposedly you can fix this by leaving it under a lamp. So if you're unsure of which version you have, you can check the rear element of the lens. Any signs of yellowing means it's a 7-element lens. Now, I've heard and read stories about this lens before, but I never thought I'd have the opportunity to actually own one. Finding a good vintage lens online can be quite the hassle, and you have to be able to make sure it's in good condition without being able to hold it. And for the nicer condition ones, a lot of sellers will jack up the prices because they know it's worth. So maybe this is just buyer's justification, but running into this lens made me feel like I had to buy it. It wasn't a lens I needed or even wanted, to be honest, but I knew about this lens and I figured it'd be really unlikely for me to find another one in this condition at this price. It only had a few scratches on the manual focus ring, but otherwise was in really good condition. And I figured I could always resell it back at home if I didn't like it. So that's me justifying the purchase. All in all, it ran me about $100 tax-free after converting to US dollars, which sounds like a really good deal in retrospect. But if you know me, you'll know I have a spending aversion for things I don't need. Street photography and my experience. The Super Takumar lenses are built for the M42 mount, so depending on what you shoot with, you'll need an adapter. In my case, I shoot fujifilm, so I had to adapt this lens to APS-C. That means that instead of a standard 50mm focal length, it was now roughly a 75mm. Full frame equivalent, of course. It's not ideal for my kind of street photography, but I figured I'd make it work somehow. Again, justification, right? For the rest of my time in Japan, I only used this lens about once or twice. I still had my main setup which I used to get the shots I had in mind, so this was just a lens to experiment and have fun with. I paired it up with the Fujifilm X Pro 3, which made for a cool vintage retro, but modern setup. I also figured because I'd be manually focusing, I'd have to slow down anyways, making the X Pro 3 a good choice to carefully compose my images through the viewfinder. Here are some interesting things I learned about this lens when using it. Focal length experience. A 75mm equivalent was actually a neat change of pace. I'm typically used to and hardwired for the 35mm equivalent of the X100-6, so being able to take photos from afar was actually a lot of fun. It was a bit awkward at first, but over time I found myself understanding where I needed to be to get the shots I wanted. I think that learning different focal lengths teaches you invaluable perspectives when it comes to photography. And the biggest thing I learned from using this focal length was that I could and should take my time. There was simply no need to be as quick with it because I have more time when shooting from afar. And being able to pick out subjects from a distance rather than photographing what is available in your immediate vicinity is a different way of looking at the world. Manual focus experience. Now when it comes to manual focusing again, I did find myself having a bit of trouble. It meant I had to slow down, adjust, and make sure I nailed focus properly. And many of the pictures I took were out of focus. This was in part due to the wide aperture of this lens. f1.4 is really wide, much wider than I expected. Not only does this affect how bright your image is, but it also makes it harder to nail your manual focus. It can be difficult at times to know if your shot is in focus, even with the highlights on in your camera. Plus, sometimes you just don't have the time to move your manual focus ring to match moving subjects. This meant a lot more anticipation for street photography rather than reaction. You need to see the shots happening almost a step ahead so you can get everything right before it happens. Otherwise, you'll just be too late. Later on in the day, I raised my aperture to about f4, which made things much easier. f4 is a solid aperture and allowed me to get enough of my subjects in focus so I could fire without slowing down. Plus, I don't have to turn the ring around as much because it covers a bigger range of focus. Image quality, sharpness, and characteristics. As I explored Tokyo, I mainly focused on people, perspectives, and things that interested me. And going back, looking through the photos and editing them, I was quite pleased with the results. The great pleasure of shooting with vintage lenses are the unique looks you'll get. I find that many vintage lenses have a bit more of a bloom to them. They're not as clinical or as clean as many modern digital lenses, and that's actually a good thing. It adds a bit of character and touch when compared to a normal lens. I'm hesitant to say it gives it more of a film look, but that's probably a pretty good description. You'll notice the difference between some of the images I took with the Takumar versus my more modern lenses. And although it's not a direct side-by-side comparison, you can tell it looks different. Everything looks softer, more flowery, and feels a tad more nostalgic. And by softer, I don't mean the actual sharpness of the images, but rather the feeling you get from them. Because all in all, the Takumar is actually quite a sharp lens. I'm not the type of photographer to harp on image sharpness, but this is one of the first things I noticed. Out of the several different vintage lenses in the past I've shot with, this is one of the sharper ones. Even when shooting wide open, as long as your subjects are in focus, they'll be somewhat sharp. It will be better at f4 though. And because it's a 50mm lens, the compression and fall off from your subjects is really nice. You're not going to get some fancy swirly bokeh like the Helios 44-2, but that's okay. I'm not one to be that crazy about bokeh anyways. Final thoughts, was it worth it? So overall, I had a great time shooting with this lens and found it to be a great alternative to the lenses I'm used to. Sometimes the look from my normal lenses can get a bit boring, and this is a great way to mix it up. And I feel like it doesn't lag or lose on image quality by that much, rather it has a unique charm to it. I do wish the Takumar was a bit wider because the focal length is tighter than I'd like, especially since I shoot APS-C, but that can't be helped. So I do still need to use and test it more in everyday scenarios to see what I can do with it. But for a lens I've heard so much about but never thought I'd actually get, I'm pretty happy with it. And I'll update you guys as I continue to learn more about this legendary vintage lens. Let me know your thoughts and if you have any experiences with the Takumar in the comment section down below. And if you want to learn more and build a solid foundation with photography, check out Photography Essentials, it's free. You can also help support me by adding to the travel fund or by grabbing a copy of The Sinking Sun, my latest photography zine. Thanks as always for watching, have a great day, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.